I'm telling you, Brenda, the mulch is within the approved palette, so I don't see why this is even an issue. I dug my fingers into the junk drawer, shoving aside a tangle of dead charging cables and old takeout menus to find a single AAA battery for the kitchen scale. Brenda, our HOA president, leaned against my kitchen island. She kept up this thin, persistent whine about the unauthorized shade of mahogany in my flower beds. I hadn't finished putting away the Sunday Costco run. 3 oversized boxes of paper towels and a gallon-sized jar of mayonnaise sat on the counter, taking up the space where I usually organized my weekly planner. The Phoenix heat pushes into you. Even with the AC humming at 68, I felt the humidity of a weird monsoon shift making the air heavy. It's just that the committee's noticed a discrepancy, Brenda said. She shifted her weight and stared at a smudge on my granite instead of looking at me. We just want the neighborhood to stay cohesive. My phone buzzed on the counter next to the mayonnaise. I glanced at it, expecting a text from my daughter. Instead, I saw a notification from the Easy Pass app. A toll charge, a high one. I paused with my hands still inside the drawer. The app flagged a charge from a toll plaza 3 towns over, timestamped for last Tuesday at 2:15 p.m. Tuesday was a workday, Elijah X. Lewis told me he was in back-to-back meetings at the office all day. A fact he'd complained about during dinner that night. Anyway, I said, pulling my hand out of the drawer without the battery. I'll check the bylaws again. I'm sure we're fine. Brenda gave me a tight, closed-mouth smile, the kind that says she's already written the violation notice in her head, and finally left. Once the door clicked shut, I picked up the phone. I didn't call Elijah. I didn't even text him. I just stared at the toll charge. I treat my marriage like a corporate project. I don't do emotional outbursts. I do performance reviews. Every 6 months, I sit Elijah X. Lewis down and we go over the KPIs of our relationship. Communication, financial transparency, household contributions. He usually laughs and calls me a project manager, but he always signs off on the goals. We had a system. Systems don't fail unless there's a hidden variable. I walked over to the counter and looked at the printed quote from the mechanic. It had been sitting there for 2 weeks. The mechanic quoted me $4,000 for the transmission on my SUV. That number made me feel physically ill when I first saw it, a cold spike of panic in my chest. I postponed the appointment, driving the car with a prayer and a hope that the shuddering in second gear would just go away. I felt the money tightening lately, despite the spreadsheets. I scrolled through my recent calls and found a voicemail from an unknown number from 3 days ago. I had ignored it, but now I pressed play. Is he still paying? A woman's voice asked. She sounded tired and flat. He said he'd have the rest by Friday. Just let me know if the arrangement changed. The recording stopped. I played it again. Then a third time. I didn't know who she was. The arrangement. It sounded like a debt, or maybe a settlement. I tried to map it to anything in our lives. A secret loan, a forgotten medical bill. I replayed it a 4th time, searching for background noise or a name that would turn this from a vague suspicion into a fact. I heard nothing but her voice and a heavy silence. Elijah X. Lewis came through the front door about 20 minutes later. He looked like hell, his tie loosened and his skin pale under the kitchen LEDs. He didn't look at me. He went straight to the fridge and pulled out a cold bottle of water. Brenda was here, I said. He sighed, the sound rattling in his chest. Again? She's obsessed with the mulch. He took a long drink of water, his Adam's apple bobbing. He didn't ask how my day was or mention the Costco haul. He just stared into the fridge for a few seconds, too long. I'm going to put some things away in the garage, he muttered, glancing toward the hallway. He didn't wait for a response. He just walked away, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood. I followed him, but I stayed back. I watched him enter the garage, where the heat hit like a wall of air. He didn't see me standing in the doorway. He went straight to his heavy-duty steel toolbox, the one he kept locked with a keypad. He punched in the code, his birthday, probably, and opened the top drawer. He reached in, pulled something out, and stepped toward the back of the garage, away from the light. I waited until he went back inside the house to wash his hands. My heart hammered against my ribs as I stepped into the garage. The air smelled of oil and old cardboard. I reached the toolbox and touched the keypad. It was still warm. I didn't know the code, but he hadn't clicked the drawer shut all the way. He left it ajar by a fraction of an inch. I hooked my finger under the metal lip and pulled. I found a small, cheap prepaid phone tucked beneath a pile of oily rags and a set of rusted wrenches. A burner. I picked it up. The screen had a crack, and a single unread message sat on the lock screen. It wasn't from a woman. It was a notification from a legal service, and the word lien stood out in the preview. Lien. I saw the word in the notification preview on my cracked screen. Holding my breath, I let my thumb hover over the glass. The urge to swipe up and see which legal service had sent the message was strong, but the sound of the kitchen faucet interrupted me. Elijah was washing his hands. Slipping the phone under oily rags, I stepped away from the toolbox. I leaned against the workbench and forced my breathing to slow. Footsteps echoed in the garage. When Elijah appeared in the doorway, he wiped his palms on a hand towel, his eyes scanning the room. He jumped slightly upon noticing me. "Still here," he muttered. "I saw a notification on a phone," I said. Keeping my voice flat, I mirrored the tone I used during quarterly reviews at work. I stayed rooted to the workbench. Elijah stopped moving. He didn't ask which phone. He just stood there with his shoulders hunched. "What are you talking about?" "The burner phone in your toolbox. I saw a message about a lien." For a moment, only a neighbor's leaf blower sounded in the distance. Elijah avoided my gaze, looking instead at the toolbox and then back toward the house. He let out a short, breathless laugh. "Lori, honestly, you're just overthinking things. You're doing that project manager thing again where you look for a problem to solve." "A lien isn't a thing, Elijah. It's a legal claim. Why do you have a secret?" He sighed and rubbed the back of his neck. His skin looked gray in the dim garage light. "It's for work. Some of the contractors don't like using company lines for everything. The lion thing is probably just a spam notification or some old vendor dispute. It's not a big deal." "Since when do contractors require burner phones?" "You're spiraling," he said. He used the same tone he employed whenever he wanted me to drop a subject. "Take a breath. You've been stressed about the car and the HOA. You're seeing ghosts." He walked past me, his shoulder brushing mine, and headed back into the house. He didn't offer an explanation, dismissing me as spiraling. I stayed in the garage long after he left. I felt my phone buzz in my pocket. The North Valley PTA chat was blowing up. 3 other moms were debating silent auction items. Jen texted, "Whatever works. My husband forgot the date of the auction twice this week." Men are just hopeless with calendars, right? Lol. Staring at the screen, I watched the other women trade stories about forgotten anniversaries and lost dry cleaning. My grip tightened on the phone. I almost typed a response, but the memory of that one word stopped me. A lien wasn't a forgotten anniversary. By the time Elijah went to bed, I had moved into the home office. Opening the laptop, I logged into our shared accounts. The mortgage was paid. Utility accounts showed 0 balances. I scrolled back through 6 months of the joint savings account to look for patterns. Small, irregular withdrawals appeared. 200 here, 500 there. Most carried the label, "Missing your hardware," but the frequency had increased. Over the last 3 months, $12,000 had vanished into those categories. On the desk sat the printed quote for my SUV transmission. $4,000. I looked at the missy withdrawals and then at the quote. The numbers didn't add up. My throat tightened. I tried to swallow, but my voice came out as a small, cracked sound. Opening a separate tab, I checked my personal savings, the inheritance from my aunt. Since Elijah had no access to it, I began calculating how much cash I could move into a private account without triggering a notification. To avoid tying my only liquid assets to a joint identity, I spent the next hour moving funds in small increments. My fingers shook on the keyboard. Around midnight, the floorboards creaked in the hallway. I closed the laptop and leaned back, pretending to read a PDF. Elijah appeared in the doorway in gray pajama pants. He leaned against the frame and watched me. "Working? Just organizing some files," I said. He stared with an unreadable expression before turning back toward the bedroom. Once I heard him settle into bed, I opened the laptop again. I searched for the legal service name from the burner phone. Instead of a law firm, I found a government portal for tax liens. After typing in our address, I watched the page load slowly. I opened the PDF that appeared. Notice of Federal Tax Lien. The amount exceeded the 12,000 missing from the savings. I stared at the digits until they blurred. In the dark, I listened to my husband breathing in the next room. I felt my phone buzz. My daughter had sent a text. "Hey mom, can you Venmo me $40 for the field trip tomorrow?" Looking from the request to the lien, I closed the laptop. Staring at the black laptop screen, I saw my exhausted reflection. I opened the Venmo app and sent $40 to my daughter for her field trip. A federal tax lien sat on our house while I moved that small amount of money. Walking to the window, I peered through the blinds. A neighbor's sprinkler hissed over a lawn too green for the season. The liens explained the what, but the why remained missing. $12,000 missing from savings was one thing, but a federal lien meant Elijah hid a debt the government finally caught up to. Returning to the desk, I recalled the miscellaneous filing box in the hallway closet. Elijah shoved everything from old warranties to HOA guidelines into that plastic bin. For 3 years, I urged him to digitize the mess, but he insisted on physical copies. Kneeling on the hardwood, I pulled the bin out. Old paper and dust filled the air. I dug through the contents, tossing aside a blender manual and a folder of utility bills. Tucked behind a thick binder of HOA bylaws, a labelless manila folder caught my eye. I opened it. Documents from a law firm 2 hours away sat inside. I scanned a signed settlement agreement and a series of payment schedules. No affair, no gambling problem. 2 years ago, Elijah hit a pedestrian in a DUI hit and run. He struck a woman, leaving her with a shattered pelvis and a traumatic brain injury. A witness helped the victim's family track him down. To save his career from a prison sentence, he paid a private settlement to keep the charges off the public record. The woman's voice on the voicemail asked, "Is he still paying?" He paid her in installments. Using our joint savings, he kept her quiet, and the lawyers happy. The $12,000 went to hush money, not hardware or misc expenses. To cover the settlement, he diverted his self-employment tax money, trading our home's equity for his own freedom. Sitting on the floor with the folder spread around me, I checked the math. I compared the total settlement amount to the lien on my laptop. The numbers matched. He bled us dry to cover a crime I didn't know he committed. I thought of the $4,000 quote for my SUV transmission. The inheritance money I had just moved came to mind. If the government seized assets, they would take everything tied to this address. Scrambling up, I grabbed my phone. I took photos of every page, signature, and date. Uploading them to a secure cloud folder, I set a password Elijah didn't have. I returned to the laptop, downloaded the full PDF of the tax lien, and emailed it to a private address. Elijah opened the front door. He hummed a tuneless song as he walked in. Leaving the folder under the edge of the hallway runner, I waited for him to walk past. He appeared at the end of the hall, smelling of night air and peppermint. He stopped when he saw me standing in the dim light. "You're still up." He gripped the strap of his gym bag without moving toward me. "I was looking for the HOA bylaws," I said. "I want to see the approved mulch pallet before I talk to Brenda again." Elijah shifted his weight. His eyes darted to the plastic bin on the floor. He let out a short, breathless laugh. "Lori, honestly, it's midnight, just go to sleep. We can deal with the mulch tomorrow." As he started to walk toward the bedroom, I stayed rooted to the spot. I watched his shoulders hunch. He avoided my eyes. "Did you have a good walk?" I asked. His back to me. A few seconds passed before he spoke. He muttered, "Just needed to clear my head." He kept walking, his footsteps heavy on the hardwood. I listened to the bedroom door close. I checked my phone. A notification from the North Valley PTA group chat appeared. Jen posted a photo of a centerpiece and asked if the ribbons were too much. Staring at the ribbons, I looked at the plastic bin and the hidden folder. I ignored the chat. Walking back into the office, I sat down and opened a new spreadsheet. I created a column for debts and another for assets. Finally, I typed in the total from the settlement agreement. I stared at the number in the spreadsheet. It wasn't just a debt. It was the exact amount he'd drained from our future to keep himself out of a jail cell. I woke up to that typical Phoenix glare, the kind of heat that makes the pavement smell like hot asphalt and old tires. I didn't go back to bed. I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and a manila folder spread out in front of me. Elijah walked in at 7, wearing his work khakis and carrying a travel mug. He stopped 3 feet from the table. His eyes dropped to the settlement papers. He didn't try to deny it this time. He just stood there, his shoulders curling inward. "Lori, I was going to fix it," he muttered. He wouldn't look at me. He started clicking the lid of his mug open and shut. "I just didn't know how to tell you without everything." "The house is already falling apart, Elijah," I interrupted. "There's a federal lien on the property." He let out a short, breathless laugh and finally looked up. His eyes were bloodshot. "You're doing that thing again. The project manager thing. You're treating this like a budget error. I could have gone to prison." I looked over at the fridge. I had the quote for my SUV transmission pinned there. $4,000. I'd been postponing that repair for weeks because the quote made me sick. And I didn't want to dip into our emergency fund. Meanwhile, he used that fund to pay off a woman whose pelvis he'd shattered in a car accident. "Get out," I said. My voice stayed flat. He didn't leave immediately. He started a campaign. He didn't yell or fight. He just leaned into this exhausted husband persona. He told a few people, including some of the North Valley PTA circle, that I was having a crisis. He told them my need for control had finally snapped and that he worried about my mental state. He wanted to paint me as the unstable one. If he did that, the facts about the money and the crime would just look like the delusions of a woman losing her grip. Then Jen texted me. "Lori, honey, Elijah mentioned you're going through some stuff. But also, why did you send me a PDF of a federal tax lien?" I hadn't sent it to the whole group, but I'd sent it to Jen and Brenda. I knew how they worked. They pretended to be supportive, but they traded details like currency. I didn't tell them he'd hit someone. I just gave them the government document and the law firm's letterhead. In a neighborhood where everyone judges your mulch and your credit score, a federal lien is a disaster. By the time Elijah tried to play the victim at the Friday morning coffee meetup, the narrative shifted. He walked in expecting pity, but the women just looked at him with a detached curiosity. The way you look at a car wreck on the I-10. They didn't ask about my mental state. They asked how he planned to pay the IRS. The fallout wasn't some big explosion. It was a slow, grinding process of paperwork and cold silence. We didn't divorce overnight. We couldn't. Between the kids' school schedules and the mess of the lien, we stayed in the house for 6 months. We lived in a state of aggressive functionality. The house felt different. I could feel the tension every time we were in the same room. We stopped eating dinner together. I managed the calendar, the kids' sports, and the dwindling joint accounts with a precision that probably would have terrified him if he actually cared. I treated him like a problematic vendor I had to keep on a contract until the project ended. I spent 3 weekends in a windowless office with a tax attorney. We figured out how to protect my inheritance and what we could salvage from the home's equity. I had to figure out how much cash I could move into a separate account without starting a war or triggering a legal red flag. Every time I signed a document that listed Elijah as a debtor, I felt a dull thrum of anger, but I didn't let it show. I just signed the line and moved to the next page. Eventually we split. We didn't have a big fight. We just exchanged a series of emails regarding the division of assets. He moved into a small rental on the other side of town. It was far enough away that I didn't have to see his car in the driveway, but close enough that we still had to coordinate the kids. Now, my life is measured in Saturday mornings. Every weekend, I drive to the soccer fields. I set up my folding chair on the north side of the pitch. 10 minutes later, Elijah pulls up and sets up his chair on the south side. We don't speak. We don't wave. We just sit there for 90 minutes, staring at our kids in their oversized jerseys, separated by a strip of grass and a decade of resentment. The other parents know. They're polite, but they keep their distance. I'm not the corporate mom anymore. I'm the woman who survived the lien. It's a different kind of status, but it's stable. Thanksgiving felt quiet this year. I spent the afternoon in the kitchen, the oven humming and the house smelling of sage and butter. The kids spent the first half of the day with him and came home late, smelling like his new cheap apartment. Sitting at the table, I looked at the empty chair where he used to sit and complain about the stuffing. I took a bite of the turkey and realized I'd actually seasoned it correctly for once. At least nobody was criticizing my cooking. Thank you so much, Lori, for trusting us and sharing your story with the community. It is absolutely heartbreaking to realize that the person she built a life with was hiding such a devastating secret. Between the federal tax lien and the horror of that hit and run, the level of betrayal Elijah put her through is just staggering. To go from being a partner to treating her husband like a problematic vendor just to survive is a heavy burden to carry. Now, I want to hear from all of you. Lori is now living in a state of aggressive functionality, sharing a soccer field with her ex-husband in total silence every single weekend. Do you think this cold, distant peace is the healthiest way to co-parent? Or should she have pushed for more closure before settling into this routine? What would you do if you discovered a secret settlement folder hidden in your own home? Please leave your thoughts and advice for Lori in the comments below. If you found this story powerful, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel so you never miss a confession. We will see you in the next one.